Hey Mustangs, in this video we're going to take a quick look at the basics for the respiratory system. Now you're going to need your notebook and also some printouts from the class website. So if you go onto the notes page, you're going to have printouts for this here and for also the digestive system. So if you get all those printouts ready to go before you even start the YouTube notes, it'll be a lot easier. Now we're going to start this is going to go on page 173. So on the top of page 173, you're going to title it Respiratory Introduction Notes, and then you'll be ready to do these. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So for the respiratory system, every single body system has a function that keeps the body going, that maintains homeostasis, that keeps everything in check, that keeps those optimal conditions inside the body. So in the case of the respiratory system, this is going to involve being in control of the exchange of gases. So for the respiratory system, the function is not to breathe. People often want to say, oh, the function is to breathe. Breathing isn't the function. Breathing is something that's done in order for the respiratory system to complete its function. Okay, so the function of the respiratory system is actually to just exchange gases. So the exchange of gases is its function. Now, it's going to bring oxygen into the body, and it's going to remove carbon dioxide from the body. Okay, so the two gases that are being exchanged here are oxygen bringing in so that way the cells can use it for cellular respiration, and carbon dioxide getting it out of the body. Carbon dioxide is a waste product. It needs to be removed from the body. And carbon dioxide was also created during cellular respiration, needs to be removed. Alright, now the place where this happens is the lungs. So the lungs are the primary site of gas exchange, and they're found in the chest region or the thoracic cavity. You have ribs that surround them. Remember, all the really important organs are protected by bone, so that way they're not damaged very easily. So you have ribs that surround the lungs to protect them, and then there's a muscle underneath it, which is called the diaphragm. Alright, so if you take a look at this picture here, on this side of the picture it shows what the lung looks like surrounded by the rib cage, and this, what you see underneath here, this red, that's actually the diaphragm, not the whole thing. You don't actually see everything of the diaphragm here. Then on this side, it's taking the rib cage off and also looking to the inside to see what the inside of the lungs would look like here. Alright, for breathing, okay, so breathing, in order for gases to be exchanged, we breathe to bring oxygen in and to release carbon dioxide out. So, a few questions here. Which part of your brain monitors breathing? Well, the most basic part of the brain, the most primitive part of the brain, which is the brain stem. So if you take a look at this picture here, right down here, this is the brain stem, most primitive part of our brain. Basically, the brain stem is in charge of a lot of the autonomic functions of the nervous system, or the things that we don't usually have to think about. They're not necessarily directly in our control. So that is the brain stem. Big question here, what gases does your brain monitor to control breathing? Okay. Now, a lot of people go right to the wrong answer usually. The correct answer is not oxygen. So our brain stem isn't monitoring oxygen, it's actually monitoring the gas that is a waste, because we don't want this waste to build up inside the body. So our brain stem monitors carbon dioxide. Okay, so basically there's a certain amount, homeostasis for carbon dioxide, that's acceptable. As carbon dioxide builds in your blood, the brainstem's monitoring this, and when carbon dioxide gets too high, you're going to breathe that carbon dioxide out, and then the levels drop back down to homeostasis, and you breathe in oxygen in the process. So every single time your carbon dioxide levels go up, you have to breathe it out, and that's why your brainstem's telling you to breathe. Now, if you were to hold your breath, you would build up carbon dioxide levels very high, and you can control that for a small period of time, but eventually your brainstem will force you to breathe because the carbon dioxide levels basically get into the red. They're so high, your brain is going to force you to breathe to get those carbon dioxide levels back down to homeostasis. Now, when you're doing activity, you breathe faster because when you're doing activity, you're going through cellular respiration faster. That creates more carbon dioxide, and you have to breathe quicker to get rid of all that excess carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide has to get back down to homeostasis, so you breathe faster to get rid of that carbon dioxide. Alright, last question for breathing. Which muscle is involved in breathing? That's that muscle that lays underneath the lungs, which is the diaphragm. Alright, so here's a picture of the diaphragm here. So you can actually see it. This is two different animations. The diaphragm, how the diaphragm contracts and relaxes. Every single time it goes up, it's actually relaxing. And every single time it goes down, it's contracting. Another visual here. Okay, so real quickly, just going to draw a picture on how this works. So we're going to draw this right in the section where it's titled diaphragm action. So you're going to go like this. We're going to draw two images. The first will be showing the diaphragm when it's relaxed. So these are the tubes that lead into the lungs. Okay, so this would be like from our nose, the tube that leads down into our lungs. Here is one lung here. Here is the other lung here. Okay. Underneath, we're going to show a relaxed diaphragm. So when the diaphragm is relaxed, it's actually pushed upward. So I'm going to put relaxed diaphragm. P-H-R, my bad. So when the diaphragm is relaxed, what this does, it creates high pressure on the inside of the lungs. And this is higher pressure than the outside of the body, so we'd say this is low pressure out here. Now, if you remember way back to when we learned about diffusion, molecules like to move from high concentration to low concentration. They like to do the same thing with pressures. So when you create high pressure here and lower pressure here, molecules want to move from that high pressure to the low pressure. So this is how you exhale. This is how you breathe out. Okay? So this is exhaling. Okay? And this is all when the diaphragm relaxes. So high pressure here, low pressure outside. The air molecules want to move outward. Now you're not actually blowing out, it's because of these pressures. Air moves from high to low. Now over here we're going to do inhaling. Okay? So here we're going to draw the same diagram to start. So the tubes that lead into the lungs. And then one lung here, and one lung here. And this time we're going to draw the diaphragm contracted. Okay, so it's not pushing up into the thoracic cavity, so this is a contracted diaphragm. Okay, and when the diaphragm is contracted like this, this causes a low pressure on the inside of the lungs. There's higher pressure on the outside of the body, so the air molecules want to move inward. So the air moves inward into the lungs, causing you to breathe in or inhale. Okay? So we don't actually suck the air in. A lot of people think that we're sucking the air in. Yeah, you can take control of that and suck the air in, but when you're just breathing normally, otherwise, if this is actually what we did, you'd actually hear people going all the time, and that would be our normal breathing, but that's not. It's all about the pressure systems here. So creating high pressure on the outside, creating low pressure on the inside, there's higher pressure on the outside, so the air moves inward. You don't have to suck it in. It's naturally drawn inward because of these pressure differences. All right, that's the end for the diaphragm here. Last thing will be the pathway for the air. So the pathway following oxygen and carbon dioxide, oxygen into the body, and the pathway that carbon dioxide takes out of the body. Okay, so it starts, we actually take oxygen in, so we're going to follow oxygen in. For carbon dioxide, it would be just the exact reverse of this. So oxygen comes in through the nasal cavity. It can come in through the mouth, that is true. Okay, so oxygen can come in through the mouth, but our mouth is actually for eating. The nasal cavity is for taking in the oxygen. Okay, actually your nose, which is the nasal cavity here, the nose is designed for taking the oxygen in, filtering the air out. It has hairs inside to trap things so that way it doesn't get down into your lungs. You breathe through your mouth, you don't have all that. So it's the nasal cavity that you're actually supposed to be breathing in through. So all those mouth breathers out there, usually those people tend to get more sore throats and stuff like that. So it's through the nose that you're supposed to be breathing air in. So oxygen goes in through the nasal cavity. It goes to the back of the throat. So the back of your throat there is called the pharynx. Okay? From the pharynx, at the bottom of the pharynx, it branches into two tubes. One tube that leads down to your stomach and one tube that leads down to your lungs. Now, if you feel your throat, if you take your hand and you feel your throat right there, you're actually feeling the tube that leads down to your lungs, and it has these cartilage rings inside of it to keep it held open. That's what you're feeling when you feel it right there in your throat. That is called the trachea. Okay, so that's the one that leads to your lungs. Now, how do you prevent your food and drink from going into your trachea versus going into where it's supposed to, which is your esophagus? Well, on top of the trachea, there's a flap of tissue that opens and closes. Every single time you swallow, the flap closes over the trachea, and it makes sure all your food and drink and spit go down into your esophagus, down to your stomach. Every single time you breathe in, that flap opens up, and the air goes down into your trachea. Okay? So that flap of tissue is called the epiglottis. Oops, spelled wrong here. Try again. Okay, so the epiglottis is that flap of tissue that covers the trachea, makes sure only air goes in and out of the trachea and not food, drink, or spit. Now, every now and then, if you've ever heard the saying, it went down the wrong pipe or the wrong tube, that means that the epiglottis didn't close in time, and either food or drink or spit gets into your trachea, and the lungs become very irritated when that happens, and you start coughing almost instantly. Okay, so the epiglottis is really important that it opens and closes in time. And this is also how people choke. When people choke on food, the food, instead of going into the esophagus, it winds up getting past the epiglottis and lodged in the trachea, and it blocks the pathway of oxygen into the body. All right, from the trachea branches into each lung. Now, the branch into each lung, they're called bronchi. So these are tubes that go into one lung each. Bronchi branch into smaller tubes. And there's not just 3 or 4, just simplifying here. So they branch into smaller tubes called bronchioles. Okay. Now, if you've ever had bronchitis, it's when these are actually inflamed and could be infected. So bronchitis is when your bronchi and your bronchioles are messed up, and that causes it really hard. Your chest feels heavy and it's hard to breathe. Okay. Now, the bronchioles, they all have dead ends. And this is actually, the dead ends are the most important part of the pathway, because that's actually where the gases actually finally get exchanged. So these dead ends are called alveoli. And they're little air sacs, basically, and we're going to take a close look at those in another video. Okay? So this is our pathway into the lungs, from the nasal cavity through the pharynx, past the epiglottis to the trachea, branching into each lung, the bronchi. Bronchi tubes become smaller and branch into bronchioles, and then finally they dead end at the alveoli. Alright, so here, if we follow the pathway here, just like we just saw, so through the nasal cavity, past the pharynx, that's right here, this is the pharynx. Okay, this flap that you see right here, that is the epiglottis. The tube going to the back, that's the esophagus. The front one that's white, that is the trachea. So it'd go past the epiglottis when the epiglottis is open, down the trachea. Here's the bronchi right here. So this bigger tube is the bronchi. The smaller tubes that we see here are the bronchioles. Okay, so those are the bronchioles. Okay, and here we don't see the alveoli, but again, they're the most important part of the pathway. Next picture, right here. So here's the end of a bronchiole, and these are alveoli. They're tiny little air sacs. So we're looking at them in 3 different ways here. Here is the alveoli cut open, so we can see how they're little air sacs. Here's the alveoli without any capillaries around them. And here they are with the capillaries. So this is how they would really look, the capillaries actually surrounding them. And the reason why capillaries are around them is so that gas exchange can occur. Here's another picture. All right, so that's it for the respiratory system introductory notes. The next video will be on a quick little sketch of the alveoli and how gas is exchanged.